In the dark shadows, in the white cold, fearlessly we search for knowledge new and old. We drink the strong spirits and read the ancient tomes. The order of the Abracast. We are the brave and the bold.
Nevertheless, Bernard writes, in the death of the pagan does the Christian glory, because Christ is glorified. But this must be read with what follows. In the death of the Christian, the liberality of the king is open, and when the soldier to be rewarded is led out, then the just man will rejoice over him. When he will have seen punishment, the God's justice is manifested both in the punishment of the wicked and in the reward of his fallen. And this is what gives glory to Christ, and why the Christian rejoices, because the justice of God is established and the injustice of sin is removed. This is why Bernard says he is plainly the vindicator of Christ against those who do evil. And he is reckoned the defender of Christians. Thus, for Bernard, the Knights Templar, and by the extension all Crusaders, are the servants of God and captains in his army, fighting by his command. And the Crusade is a war fought by his will. St. Bernard in the Theology of the Crusade by J. Marlow Gazzoli.
The Abracast, occult, history, conspiracy, and violence.
Broadcasting in the battlefields right here in the People's Republic of Pennsylvania, Quarantine Zone Charlie. In this battlefield hidden deep below the Stigmata Studios building, in the heart of the Steel City. I'm John, and this is the Abracast. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Got a couple things to get through real fast. First of all, the first thing that I have to get through is I hope everybody's doing well at the time of this recording, where pretty much everybody's still locked down. There's a lot of talk of getting this thing back on its feet and rolling again. I look around and I see that the American people are lifting this quarantine themselves. As soon as these checks are hitting everyone's bank accounts, I notice there's more and more cars on the road, and good to them. With that being said, this week is another one of those rare, the stars aligned just right, the scheduling happened without a hitch, and we got a great interview on Friday that ties into this episode we're doing here. This is part 2 of the Second Crusade. I get to sit down on Friday's interview episode. I got to sit down with, he's a scholar, a historian, and he's an author. He actually just did a presentation at the Army War College about Islam. He has written a few books. His latest one is called The Sword and the Scimitar, 14 Centuries of War Between Islam and the West. And the guy's name is Raymond Ibrahim. And we just had a great conversation. It obviously ties directly into what we're going to be speaking about tonight. The last thing I want to bring up is Vessel of the Art. Now is your time to produce it. We have a record-breaking week this week. I don't know if the Easter sermon had anything to do with this. I'm going to talk about that here in a second, but we have got 3 brand new Vessel of the Art supporters We have, I don't want to dox anybody. We have Jesse, Emily, and Joe. They're both, all three of them are Vessel of the Art supporters. It's a $10 tier. So, here, raise your glass to them and say thank you very much for all the supporters on Patreon and Subscribestar and all the people that listen out there. Anyways, here's to you. So we'll be getting a jar out to them here next month, and also got to start making room on my call schedule for more folks. So part of the tier that you get at the Vessel of the Art degree is a phone conversation. Every month we touch base on a call. You get to shoot the shit. It's not always about the show. It's rarely about the show, I would say. But yeah, so those you threes guys out there, you newbies to the degree, thank you. Your jars will go out next month, and I'll be reaching out to you to schedule a phone call if you would like to participate. We have one guy. He does not participate at all. I try to get him to participate. He doesn't get it at all. So the Easter sermon is still out there and available, and it's still timely. What I did is I dropped a free episode. It's free to everybody on my Patreon and Subscribestar accounts, on those streams. And it's something a little bit different. I guess that's why I didn't drop it on the main show or whatever, but it's called The Easter Sermon in Quarantine, the Psychological Crisis of Jesus Christ. And I've got a lot of great feedback by it as well. Feedback to it, I should say, as well. So if you're interested in that, it's about like shadow work. It's about, I don't really want to recap it here, but yeah, it's interesting. Psychological crisis. It's also got this awful, terrible, but heart-wrenching and sweet at the same time tale story about these two lizards. So I don't know. That's available. I don't exactly know when I'm going to take it down. I am going to take it down eventually, probably at the end of this month. So if you want to check it out, it's for free on the Patreon and Subscribestar streams. Just go down. You're going to see a couple archived episodes. Just get down through them and you'll see one that's unlocked for the public, and that's the one you want to aim for. Okay, so the featured sources for this evening is where the cold open came from. St. Bernard and the Theology of the Crusade by J. Marlow Gazzoli. The famous rallying speech at Vezelay by Hugh O'Reilly. You can find that at traditioninaction.org. We also did a little bit from Wiki. Not too much, just a little bit here and there to set up our story. So the first episode of the Second Crusade business was the fall of Edessa. This one is kind of, it's kind of an amalgamation of the stuff that happens a little bit before and a little bit after, and what happens next, right? So there might be some disparate kind of threads left undone here as I go through this, but in the grand scheme of things, it'll be wrapped up nicely. Okay, I'm not fucking explaining myself anymore. The interval between after the First Crusade, through the Second Crusade, and through the Second Crusade and to the Third Crusade, two famed religious military orders known as the Hospitallers and the Templars were formed. Still, another one was formed, the Teutonic Knights. They were the Germans. They were established. The objects of all of these orders was the care of the sick and the wounded, crusaders, the entertainment of Christian pilgrims. Now, I'm not saying the entertainment of Christian pilgrims like they were like juggling for them and putting on puppet shows. They were there to protect the pilgrims going from Europe to the Holy Land. They did this in a number of ways. I did a whole episode on just the formation of the Templars a while back when we were finishing up the First Crusade. If you just go to the feature topic link on Abercast.com, you can find all the Crusade stuff right there in order. And they were also they were also charged with guarding of the holy places. Now, this I go out of my way here to say Christian pilgrims, but there is a lot of anecdotal evidence that they were guarding every kind of pilgrim. If a Muslim was coming to the Holy Land from like far away to visit the holy places, they would help them out too. So I don't want to get all into it, but I do touch on that in the other Templar thing. Actually, there's probably a few Templar episodes back there. The ceaseless battling for the cross. These fraternities soon acquired military fame that was spread throughout the Christian world, and they were joined by many of the most illustrious knights of the West, and though the gifts of the pious acquired great wealth and became possessed of numerous estates and castles in Europe as well as in Asia. So when it says Asia, they're not talking about Asia. They're not talking about the SARS and the Wuhan. Back in the day, Asia was what the Middle East was known as. I bring that up all the time. I could probably just stop qualifying that. I say it so often. But I believe it's confusing to some people, so I don't know. So following the siege of Edessa, so we're gonna get back to the siege of Edessa. Remember Zenji? Zenji was this courageous, strong leader. He was a skilled warrior, according to all of the Muslim chroniclers of his day. Spoiler alert, though. Unlike Saladin at Jerusalem in 1187, Zenji did not keep his word to protect his captives at Belbek in 1139. According to Ibn el-Idim, Zenji had sworn to the people of the citadel with strong oaths and on the Quran and divorcing his wives. When they came down from the citadel, he betrayed them. He flayed the governor alive and he hung the rest. According to Ibn el-Idim, the Edebeg, who is a Zenji character, was violent, powerful, awe-inspiring, and liable to attack suddenly. When he rode, the troops used to walk behind him as if they were between two threads out of fear. They would trample over crops, and nobody out of fear dared to trample on a single stem of them, nor march his horse on them. If they transgressed, he was crucified. He, Zenji, used to say, it does not happen that there is more than one tyrant, meaning himself, at one time. This is like the Sith rule of two. There can be only two. And when the second one gets strong enough, he slays the first one and then moves into the tyrant role. Well, we could see here something that we talk about all the time. Muslim apologetics. He was fierce and cruel and he was a tyrant. Well, they're also forgetting to tell you that this guy, as well as all these dudes, he flayed somebody and he hanged somebody, but he also kept a ton of slaves, and that catches up with him here at the end. We're going to find out at the end of this episode. In January of 1145, Zenji captured Saruj, and he besieged Berjik. But the army of Jerusalem had finally arrived and joined with Joscelin II. We might have heard about that. You might remember that guy from the last episode, the last Crusade episode. Zenji also heard of trouble in Mosul, and he rushed back to take control there. And he was praised throughout Islam as a defender of the faith. And Al-Malik, Al-Mansur, the victorious king. Joscelin II continued to rule the remnants of his country. He had been defeated pretty handily. He went back to rule the remnants of the country to the west of the Euphrates from Turbessel. But little by little, the rest of his territory was captured by the Muslims or sold to the Byzantines. Zenji continued his attempt to take Damascus in 1145, but he was assassinated by a Frankish slave, a French slave named Yarnakash. Okay, this French slave named Yarnakash in September 1145. Yarnakash was a Frankish slave who assassinated his owner, Zenji, the Atabag of Aleppo, according to Damascene chronicler Ibn al-Khwalanzi. Quote, one of Zenji's attendants for whom he had a special affection and in whose company he delighted. I'm reading between the lines here, and I'm like, I don't know if I should say this. I'll leave it up to you. I'm going to say there might have been some hanky-panky going on here. Who nursed a secret grudge against him on the account of some injury previously done by the Atabag, like a blown gasket, using the wrong tires on a dirt road. You know what I'm saying. And on finding the opportunity when he was off his guard in his drunkenness, and with the connivance and assistance of certain of his comrades amongst the attendants, quote, parentheses, other slaves, assassinated him in his sleep on the eve of Sunday the 6th, the second Rabbi, the night of Saturday the 14th of September. Yarnakash stabbed the Atabag numerous times, and then he fled to the fortress of Qualatjabar, and then from there to Damascus in the confident belief that he would be secure there, openly putting towards his action as a claim to consideration and imagining that he would be made welcome. The governor, Mulin ad-Din Nuar, instead had him arrested and sent to Zenji's son, Nur al-Din, in Aleppo. Nur al-Din sent him along to his brother, Sayaf al-Din Ghazi, in Mosul, who had him executed. Zenji was succeeded in Aleppo by his son, Nur ad-Din. Joscelin attempted to take back Edessa following Zenji's murder, and this is kind of a recap, and recaptured all but the citadel in October 1146. However, he had no help from the other Crusader states, as we heard in the last episode, and his poorly planned expedition was driven out of Edessa by Nur ad-Din in November. Joscelin, fearing for the safety of the city's Christian Armenians, attempted to break a hole in Nur ad-Din's forces through which the natives could flee to safety. However, Joscelin's attempt failed, and his fears came true when Nur ad-Din's troops massacred the fleeing Armenians and forced the survivors into slavery. This passage was from St. Bernard and the Theology of Crusade by J. Marlow Gazzoli. So this other thing about these killing the Armenians, we did a whole episode. It doesn't really tie into the Second Crusade, other than it's like Islam's continual mishandling and hatred for the Armenians. We talked about the Red Sultan and the Armenian genocide. This is an episode that was archived a few, maybe 2 months ago, maybe last month. So if you're interested in hearing all about that, this Red Sultan, the Red Sultan, the guy who was in charge of this Armenian genocide, was a piece of work. We really dig into that. It wasn't just a genocide. They were torturing these people, these Armenians. I'm like, what do these Armenians do to these motherfuckers? But of course, the answer is they were Christians. Right. So we're going to kind of shift. That's the kind of prologue to last week's episode. So we're going to shift into this week's episode, shifts into the topics of this week's episode, which is the Saint Bernard character. So on Easter Sunday of 1146 at Vezelay, King Louis VII took the cross of the Crusade, and he had announced his intention to go to Jerusalem to his court at Christmas, and it was decided that the court would meet again in Vezelay with those who would take the cross, doing so at Easter. Meanwhile, the city of Edessa had fallen at the end of 1144. The bishop of Jabala, Syria, came... Listen to this. The bishop of Jabala, Syria, came to the papal court in 1145 and informed Pope Eugenius III of his predicament. The church in the East, on December 1145, the pontiff published for the first time the Quantum Praetorius Nostri, in which he called for a crusade. However, this had not reached France by Christmas, and when Louis made his public his intention, Otto of Friesenberg says that Louis wanted to go on crusade because of his brother Philip had died before he could fulfill his own vow to do so. And that is why Louis gathered the court. When the Pope's letter did reach France, King Louis wrote back to him, and the Pope gave a favorable reply. On March 1st, 1146, Pope Eugenius published a second version of the Quantum Praetorius Nostri. Don't judge me, it's a fucking hard word, man. Which named Bernard, Abbot of Clairvaux, as the preacher of the crusade. Easter came on the 31st of March. Hey, that's my birthday. 1146, and Vezelay Louis took his nobles and took up the crosses which had been sent by the Pope himself. So many were present that they had to relocate to a field outside of town. And it was there that Bernard addressed the crowd. The king at his side, Bernard incited so many that they ran out of crosses, and Bernard tore his own clothes to make more. And he continued to preach around Vezelay. Many miracles were reported, and more took up the cross. Rowe writes of Bernard's preaching at Vezelay. It was one of St. Bernard's more glittering performances, armed with the papal letter of authorization and reading where is appropriate from the Quantum Praetorius Nostri. Bernard spoke out on behalf of the crusade as only he could speak. The response was overwhelming. St. Bernard even went to Germany and enlisted the king of the nobles there to join, something Pope Eugenius had not even countenanced. So this whole business about the German knights, which is why we mentioned the Teutonic Order earlier, because that, as well as this little piece of information, informs the whole next episode, which is why I couldn't edit it out. It had to stay in there. So if you're like, what's this motherfucker talking about Germany for? That's why. Back to it. However, St. Bernard's success in preaching did not translate into success in battle. Once the Crusader forces had gathered in Jerusalem at 1148, they decided to attack Damascus, but the siege failed, and with it, the Crusade. Louis returned to France the following year, and the failure reflected poorly on the Pope who had called for it. And Bernard lost influence with the Pope, who had been a Cistercian before his election. Cistercians were the kind of religious order that the Templars, it was like a proto-Templar thing. So I don't think the Templars were officially known as Cistercians, but it's kind of where they got their thing. So the Cistercians are known for their round churches, and that's something that, you know, if you watch the History Channel for more than 3 minutes, you know, like, that's associated with the Templars, because they're all like, don't you know that they're guarding the secrets of Christ in these weird womb-shaped churches? So we're going to get into this rallying speech at Vezelay. Hugh O'Reilly at traditionsinaction.org does a piece on it, and we're going to do a powerful reading of it here.
Welcome to Haunting History, the podcast that reaches back into the past for the events that shocked us. Tales of true crime, mystery, and the macabre. And when we're lucky, those stories where the past and the paranormal meet. Because who doesn't love a good ghost story, right? I'm your host, Kat, and joining me every week will be one of my co-hosts. Either Haley, my partner in every idea I have, or Tress, my lovely sidekick in all things paranormal. Join us this season as we discuss and share true accounts from all over Southern California and beyond, from haunted locations to newsworthy incidents and crimes that stunned us. We will dwell deep and find the people behind the headlines. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Haunting History Podcast, and rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. Also, visit our website at hauntinghistorypodcast.com. Until next time, remember, the living are far scarier than any ghost.
Learn more at abracast.com. Get bonus content by signing up for the mailing list. Get all that plus many exclusive episodes by supporting the show at patreon.com or subscribestar.com.
So, this famous rallying speech at Vezelay, we start with a little biography of Bernard here. Born in 1091, died in 1153, made Abbot of Clairvaux in 1115. Hey, this old boy had a pretty good run. Saint Bernard exercised strong influence in 12th century Europe when the Crusader states of Edessa fell in 1144. Pope Eugene III, they called him Eugenius in the last source, whom himself had been a monk in Clairvaux, called for his spiritual father to preach a second crusade to bring succor to the distressed conditions of the Holy Land. Abbot Bernard girded on the sword of the divine word and inspired many of the overseas crusade. This is one of the famous speeches preached at Vezelay, a little city in Burgundy, on Palm Sunday, March 31st. Hey! The order of the crusade preached on a large tribune on the side of a hill outside the gates of the city, with King Louis VII of France in his royal robes present. St. Bernard first read the letters of the sovereign pontiff calling for a crusade, and then made this plea to arms the large crowd that had gathered to hear his words. Here we go. How can you not know that we live in a period of chastisement and ruin? The enemy of mankind has caused the breath of corruption to fly over all religions, and we behold nothing but unpunished wickedness. Neither the laws of men or the laws of religion have sufficient power to check the depravity of the customs and the triumph of the wicked. The demon of heresy has taken possession of the chair of truth, and God has sent forth the malediction upon his sanctuary. O ye who listen to me, hasten then to appease the anger of heaven, but no longer implore his goodness by vain compliments, and clothe not yourself in sackcloth, but cover yourself with your impenetrable bucklers. The din of arms, the dangers, the labors, the fatigues of war are the penances that God now imposes upon you. Hasten then to expiate your sins by victories over the infidel, and let the deliverance of holy places be the reward of your repentance. If it were announced to you that the enemy had invaded your cities and your castles and your lands, and had ravished your wives and your daughters and profaned your temples, who among you would not fly to arms? Well then, all these calamities and calamities still greater have fallen upon your brethren, upon the family of Jesus Christ, which is yours, who Do you hesitate to repair so many evils, to revenge so many outrages? Will you allow the infidel to contemplate in peace the ravages they have committed upon the Christian people? Remember that their triumph will be the subject for grief to all ages and an eternal opprobrium upon the generation that has endured it. Yes, the living God has charged me to announce to you that he will punish them. Who shall not have defended him against his enemies? Fly then to arms, and let the holy ire animate you in the fight, and let the Christian world resound with these words of the prophet. Cursed be he who does not stain his sword with blood. If the Lord calls you to the defense of his high heritage, think not that his hand has lost its power. Could he not send 12 legions of angels, or breathe one word and all his enemies would crumble away to dust? But God has considered the sons of men to open for them the road to his mercy. His goodness has caused to dawn for you a day of safety by calling on you to avenge his glory and his name. Christian warriors who give his life for you today demands yours in return. These are combats worthy of you, combats in which it is glorious to conquer and advantageous to die. Illustrious knights, generous defenders of the cross, remember the example of your fathers who conquered Jerusalem and whose names are ascribed in heaven. Abandon then the things that perish to gather unfading psalms and conquer a kingdom that has no end. Unquote. All the barons and knights applauded the eloquence of Saint Bernard, and he was persuaded that he uttered the will of God. Louis VII, deeply moved by the words he had heard, cast himself at the feet of Bernard and demanded the cross, and then, clothed with the sign, he exhorted all those present to follow his example. So I get a lot of business thrown at me about, like, well, you say a lot of awful stuff about God. You really criticize the church a lot, but you tend to dig these crusades and all this stuff. And, I don't really have a structured answer. The only answer that I have is thank God for the Catholic Church. And I mean, let's take a second. Let's take a second to put that shit in context if you're a longtime listener of the show. And the reason I say thank God for the Catholic Church is the Catholic Church never got off the ground and Islam came around, we'd all be speaking Pishtun right now, or probably Arabic. I just say Pishtun because it's funnier. It's a funnier word. We get into this in Friday's interview episode, but a little bit. But, the world looks at the Crusades and they're like, it's these big oafish Europeans, probing into trying to take over the Middle East. But the fact of the matter is, and Raymond Ibrahim talks about this a great deal on Friday's episode, but he was like, no, actually all those lands besides, Arabia were Christians. They were all Christian lands at first. And then after Muhammad died, there was rapid expansion. We've talked about this rapid expansion ad infinitum. If you're interested in all this Islam stuff, you can find on the feature topic link a whole section on just Islam. So after Muhammad dies, there's rapid expansion. And the first places they start taking over are the places that are nearest to them. Not to go over old shit. If you want to hear about this, let's check out the Battle of Tours episode or the Spanish Inquisition episode. I cover a lot of this stuff. But so that's what Bernard's talking about. He's talking about your Christian brothers and sisters that had already been put in the sword. And then after the First Crusade, it all kind of started going back downhill. And then he's like, also, all these motherfuckers died too. You got something to say. The empire, the Christian empire, split into two, and you had the Romans on the one side and the Byzantine Empire on the other. And at this Battle of Yarmouk, which you'll hear about on Friday, the Byzantines basically lost the Holy Land, and this is part of what Bernard of Clairvaux is talking about. But he is also talking about the soldiers and the knights and all this stuff that took the Holy Land back during the First Crusade and then seemingly got the shit kicked out of them again, kind of driving them back. So when people say, like, why are you glorifying the Catholic Church and all this stuff? I'm like, because without the Catholic Church, I'd be wiping my ass with my hand and having to pray 5 times a day and being fucking goats and all this other kind of stuff, being sexually repressed. Like, I'm not going to wear that look good. You know what I'm saying? And I know this is like alt history, novella, whatever, but that's what I'm saying. That's my personal opinion. Just hear you now. Wiping your ass with your hand? What are you talking about? Fucking goats? What's that all about? All right, back to it. The hill upon which this vast multitude was assembled resounded for a long period of time with the cries of Deus vult, which translates to God wills it. Then many counts and a crowd of barons and knights followed by the example of the king. Several bishops threw themselves on the feet of Saint Bernard, taking the oath to fight against the infidels. The crosses that the abbot of Clairvaux had brought were not sufficient for the great number who asked for them, and he tore the vestments to make more. To preserve the memory of this day, Pons, abbot of Vezelay, founded upon this hill, where the knights and the barons had assembled a church that he dedicated to the Holy Cross. The tribune upon which Saint Bernard had preached this crusade remained there for a long time, the object of veneration of the faithful. The contagion of the holy enthusiasm seized not only the barons, the knights, and the common people, which classes alone participated in the First Crusade, but kings and emperors were now infected with this sacred frenzy. Saint Bernard's eloquence induced 2 monarchs, Louis VII of France and Conrad III of Germany, to take the blood-red cross of the Crusader. Conrad III of Germany, Emperor of Germany, was persuaded to leave the affairs of his distracted empire to the hands of God and consecrate himself to the defense of the sepulchre of Christ. Louis VII, a king of France, was led to undertake the crusade through remorse for an act of great cruelty that he had perpetrated upon some of his revolted subjects. So I've seen something like this before. I mean, not like a call to war, something like this before, but what did he call it? The sacred frenzy. So I've talked a lot about being raised. I was raised in a broken home. I was raised by my dad, who was a non-practicing Catholic, who, ironically, he was non-practicing, but he still thought that the left-handed people were the work of the devil, I guess, or something. I was born left-handed, and he would put a sock on my left hand, and he would tie it to my fucking leg and make me do all my stuff with my right hand. So I can't really complain because I draw with my right hand. I'm a fairly good artist, but my left hand's basically a flipper. Like, I can't do anything with it. So anyhow, that was the extent of his Catholicism. Just to the part that would ruin my life and give me dyslexia. You know, that's all. That's it. You know, he didn't get any of the divorce stuff. He didn't get any of that. And my mom raised me as a Southern Baptist, which is a lot of hellfire and brimstone and all this other kind of stuff. So Southern Baptist churches, it becomes like this thing. It's like, I want to say it's kind of like peer pressure. It's a cross between peer pressure and virtue signaling. That's great. That's a great way to think about it. And nowadays, we all talk about like these social justice warriors and they do the virtue signaling and the white knightism and all this other kind of stuff. That's a great way to put it. So it's like you're there, you just went through Sunday school and you learned all these cartoon versions of these crazy supernatural stories that happen in the Bible, but it's all like cheery and everyone's got a happy, like, hey, what happened a lot after Sodom and Gomorrah? Well, he just spent a lot of quality time with his daughters. Okay, you get that kind of answer. So then in like the regular church, you get to go upstairs and sit with the older people and go through like this other whole boring thing that you got to do. And like in the middle of it, where I put my commercials, that's where they would put or maybe it would be at the end of it, I don't know. But they do like, it's like a communion business where they're like, if the power of the Lord's talking to you this evening and you want to, or this morning, and you want to come up here and you want to, take the blood of Christ, and be baptized. And it's like you see one of your friends like get wrapped up in it and they like wander up there to like pray at the little steps around the altar and all this stuff. And then you just see like another one of your friends go up there and you're like, oh my God, maybe I should go up there too. I'm being a cool kid. Like I'm trying to make out with this chick in the basement of the church, like, too, like, so it becomes like, I mean, this is like a very microscopic version of this, but this is kind of the way that I can relate to this thing going down. Is one or two of these guys were like, yeah, man, hey, I buy this. Like, let's fucking go kill some motherfuckers and take back the Holy Land for the Christians. And then there are these, courtesans and knights and, there's a political function to all this stuff. So they're like, hey, man, if King Louis is in on this, I better be in on it too because he controls my taxes or like whatever. Anyhow, enough babbling. Let's get back to it. We just got to wrap it up here. All right, so where were we? Oh yeah, okay. So everybody's joining forces. Everyone's like, yes, we're going to become this great Christian army. We're gonna put on our hauberks and our armor and all this stuff. And we're gonna head back to the Holy Land, and we're gonna kick some So that's kind of where we're gonna end our episode. But wait, there's more. If you're asking me, like if you're thinking back to the beginning of the episode and you're like, hey, whatever happened to Joscelin II, the Count of Edessa? We found out what happened to Zenji, his slave, stabbed him multiple times when he had an opportunity and killed his ass. You might be wondering in 1150, or you might be wondering what happened to Joscelin II. In 1150, when en route to Antioch to enlist help, Joscelin was taken prisoner by Nur ed-Din's Turkomans. Joscelin was taken to the city of Aleppo, where he was led before a hostile crowd. When I think of these words, a hostile crowd, in relation to the Muslim world, all that I can think about is like the death, the USA, death, the USA. Like, this is like one step away from being cavemen out there burning flags and whatnot, yelling like, death, the USA. I'm like, that crowd is pretty hostile. I can only imagine what it would be if they were like, if these two sides of people were throwing swords at each other. Anyhow, they took him in front of this hostile crowd. They asked him to convert to Mohammedanism, and he declined to become a Muslim. He declined to become Islamic. And it's funny because, when you go back and if you go back far enough in these episodes, you'll find that all he would have had to do was say, yeah, bro, I'll become, yeah. And he might have just been like, all right, well then you just got to pay this tax and we'll let you go. But he declined. But instead of killing him, because he was still a pretty, I imagine, politically important figure, he probably was a dollar sign to them. So instead of killing him, they just put his eyes out. They just took him in front of this crowd and blinded him. And he spent a remaining 9 years of his life in captivity in a Muslim prison. And he died in the dungeons of the city of Aleppo in 1159. I'm John. This is the Abercast. Whoop, whoop. Tune in on Friday for Raymond Ibrahim. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for my new Vessel of the Arts, guys.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Send an email or visit us on social media to let us know what you think about this topic. And please remember to leave a 5-star rate and review.
Hey, did you learn something? Did you laugh? Supporting me is a way for you to be a part of the Abercast and ensure its growth and sustainability. It also means I can create a normal schedule for shows and bonus shows, as well as the exclusive Fellowcraft episodes. By supporting the show, you are not only a listener, but you are a part of the show. You supporting the show gives me a way to offer fun rewards as a thank you for showing your appreciation and support for our projects. Do you have an idea for a reward that you don't see? Let me know. My supporters are my partners. I currently pay for you to listen to the Abercast. Not only do I pay the hosting bills out of my own pocket, I volunteer my time and talent to each and every episode of the Abercast. The price of books, the time and resources of reading and researching, the massive amounts of gin and tonic needed, the equipment it takes to record the shows, the time and resources it takes to create the bonus material, and the cost to maintain the internet presence. Is it worth your support? I don't know. I'm proud of the Abercast, and I feel like I'm improving all the time. In addition to creating the show that you dig and that you are excited about, I also have a full-time commitment and other obligations. So why financial support? All of the supporters help me focus my time on the quality and development of the podcast. And what if you can't afford, $1 or $3 or $10 or whatever a month? Believe me, I get that. There are many degrees of support, but if you can't support the show financially, please consider leaving a 5-star rate and review on your preferred podcast app. And don't forget that you could sign into the mailing list and still unlock a lot of bonus content. Thank you. I cannot put into words how much it means to me that you listen to the show each time I post a new episode. Your feedback, support, and love of the stories that we talk about here is what keeps me going.